absolutely delighted to be having this conversation with Priya Purushothaman, and about this delightful book that she has written about musicians, Hindustani classical musicians. There aren't too many books in English about Hindustani classical musicians. There's one by Sheila Dhar, yes, which she wrote, I think, in the early 70s, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe the later 70s. And that was also a lovely book. But this one really sort of goes very deep into the questions of training and commitment and gharana and so many other things. First, I would like to ask you, what prompted your choice of the 8 musicians for this particular book?
Thank you so much, Kathakali ji and AKLF. I'm really happy to be here. The origins of this book is quite organic. It began sometime in COVID when I think many artists, musicians were questioning why we make art, especially when the world was going through so much turmoil and struggle. And in my own reflections, I started to think about the musicians and artists I have met in my journey and the kind of struggles and choices they made to pursue their art at any cost. And I felt that it was important to understand kind of what drives people to make music or be musicians. And even when the world seems to be going through so much things externally, artists still pursue their art. And I felt documenting those stories was important because as a musician, as a student of music, I had access through my gurus, through other musicians I met along the way, but so many stories of people who were maybe not as famous or celebrated who were going untold. So I began by just writing essays about the few musicians who were very close to me in my journey. One of my gurus, Pandit Sudhindra Bhaumik, and Pandit Yogesh Samsi, who is my other guru's brother and also like a guru and mentor to me, because I had known them for a long time and had a lot of interaction and a lot of insight into their journeys. And as it kind of came to life and it became clear that this was going to be a collection of essays and not just a few standalone, I was interested in choosing a kind of diverse group of musicians who portrayed the landscape of Hindustani music as it is today. And I think the landscape is quite different than maybe what it would have been 50 years ago or 80 years ago. So the musicians in this book come from different backgrounds, socioeconomic, religious. Some come from hereditary families of musicians. They are part of their musical lineage. Some come from families that have no connection to music, and they have still kind of found their way in the music world. Some are instrumentalists, some are vocalists, and I felt each of their journeys was kind of shedding a different light on what it takes to make music. And so of course, the balance between male musicians, female musicians. One of the musicians is a trans man musician. So bringing these different stories into the narrative was important to me.
But it's also interesting that you did not dedicate a chapter to the musician from whom you seem to have learned the most, or at least for the longest period of time, Aditya Upadhyay ji. Is there any reason for that?
Not particularly. I think I was mainly drawn to musicians whose narratives had a kind of a narrative quality that was very compelling as well for writing. So many of the musicians have gone through, I would say, unusual struggles and really unusual challenges that I felt were important for the written process. Yeah.
Yes, and one of them to whom you have dedicated 2 chapters, yes. Sudhindra Bhaumik ji, really went through a very, very difficult and unusually troubled life, and it all kind of, there was a whole huge thing when he was in pursuit of a guru,
Yeah.
looking for somebody, who could teach him. And in fact, it is there in many of the chapters with many of the musicians. A few of them were, of course, born into music. For instance, Alam Khan, thus the son of Ustad Ali Akbar Khan. Kala Ramnath, who learned from her grandfather, and also Yogesh Samsi ji, whose parents found him his guru, Ustad Alaraka Khan. But this whole pursuit of the guru, which has always been, there have been big stories around it. So would you tell us a little bit about that and about your own experience also in this area, because you are also a musician?
Sure. Yes, this is a very important part of any student of music, or especially if you're pursuing it as a performer, finding the right guru. And that can be a match of personality, match of musical sensibility, so many aspects that have to align. And for some, it can click very quickly. And of course, those who are born into a family with that legacy, as Alam says, it's a blessing. It's also a tremendous pressure. But in this book, there's a few contrasting stories. One, Shubhada Paradkarji, who has a very unusual story compared to others. After moving to Mumbai and looking for a guru for some time unsuccessfully, Pandit Gajanan Bua Joshi actually comes to her doorstep, demanding to find who is the girl in this house who sings and teach her. So even as she told me the story, she narrated it with so much gratitude that it's so rare, a guru coming to the student and choosing her and taking her under his wing. The story of my Guruji, Sudhindra Bhaumikji, is very, like you said, has many obstacles and challenges through the way. He grew up in a family, he faced a lot of struggles of migration and poverty, but so learning music as a child was not an option. He said we couldn't afford classes and there was no access, something we should not take for granted in cities like Kolkata, where there's filled with musicians and great gurus. And during all this search, when he was a child, he enjoyed film music, he enjoyed folk music, some Rabindra Sangeet. But it's only when he was in college at IIT Kharagpur and he heard a friend playing Thumri Dadra on his sitar. He said, "Hey, what's this music? It's so beautiful. I want to learn this." And from that moment, his search for a guru began, but with a lot of obstacles. So maybe I'll share a little bit of
please
this.
read from
Yes.
this part, perhaps.
At this point, this friend who played the sitar had told him about a guru he had met. And so Bhaumikji is quite intrigued by this person who he knows nothing about. Parables abound about the struggle for the search of the perfect guru. The guru will find you, don't seek him. The guru will appear to you at the right time and place in your life. Matches of guru and shishya are predetermined karmic associations. Perhaps cliches, perhaps profound truths. For Kala, which was the pet name of Bhaumikji, only one thing was true. For several decades, his guru did not appear in his life with any ease or serendipity. And even after he found them, life circumstances didn't always allow his pursuit to flow with a quality of inexplicable mystical smoothness. But when something inside of him was awakened, it was as though a low burning flame suddenly received an extra gust of oxygen. And for the first time, he saw the potency of its luminosity. It couldn't be ignored any longer. Kala was back home with his family after graduating from IIT. One morning, he left without telling anyone that he was leaving, or where he was going. Possessed by a madness to find answers, he boarded a train to the hill station, Netarhat, Bihar. Over the next 2 days of his journey, he contemplated meeting the man who had been on his mind, Mr. Shukla. Would he accept him as a disciple? Would he be the man with the answers? Kala managed to find the elusive guru at the famous Netarhat residential school. He arrived at his doorstep unannounced, a stranger seeking a mentor. He introduced himself and went straight to the point. I am Sudhindra Bhaumik. I have come to ask if you will be my guru. Shuklaji was taken aback by his story. First, he expressed his concern that Kala's family would be distraught over his sudden absence. Then he dropped the heavy news to this young 20-something-year-old. I am not your guru, but you will find your guru in time. Do not worry.
Thank you. Something that has always intrigued me, interested me about Hindustani classical music is the intense immersion that it demands. And the book is called The Call of Music, which is much more than, just a profession or an interest. It's well beyond that. It is something that almost as if, something that you cannot do without, something that you can't live without, almost like breathing. So if you would tell us a little bit about this, this immersion that it demands, of a practitioner of Hindustani classical music.
Yes. It's interesting. I'd like to share a little bit even about my own journey when I began learning music and I moved from the US to Bangalore. I was originally planning to live as a PG and go to my guru for my talim. And within some time in the kind of first month of this plan, my guru Aditi Upadhyayji said, actually, you should live with me in my home, otherwise you aren't going to get the full experience of this art. And I'm so grateful that she thought of that and she opened her home to me, because the idea of just learning and going home and doing your practice was very different than living a life that was really immersed, like you're mentioning, immersed in music. So that meant all the things outside of learning and riyaz, which are of course the core, but being in an atmosphere of music, being around all the interactions with other musicians, attending concerts, and being in a space in the culture and world of music, not just the doing of it. So I think that's, especially because this art is so, it's a very kind of slow burn process, as they say in current lingo. It requires, you have to soak in it like a achar or aging wine. It's not something you can just learn and then go home and switch off from. And so perhaps that's also why it's becoming harder in these times to pursue this art, although many people are definitely doing it and many talented youngsters are, because it demands a lot of your time and we're so used to everything being so quick and instant, and this is really the opposite. Go ahead. So.
Yeah. So the whole idea of the Guru Shishya Parampara, which involves the student of music to be living with the Guru.
Yes.
And not only is there a very rigorous process of training that is involved, it is also about absorbing the lifestyle of an artist, and also about performing in concerts and how to behave on stage.
Absolutely.
And how to also behave with organizers.
Yes.
And all of this is very anti-Instagrammatic and very, very different from the life that it has come to be now.
Yeah.
Right.
And also why institutions like SRA, where you are so important, because very few gurukuls remain in this country. I mean, I'm grateful I had in the private home of my guru, but it's very, very important, I think. It's one of the benefits of this Guru Shishya method of learning is that you're really immersed and I think it facilitates the learning in a way we really cannot articulate. It's very, very important.
Right, thank you. Thank you for that insight into this immersive art form. One of the things about this book is about its preoccupation with gender. Not only about singing gender in the chapter on Rumi Harish, but also about how much harder it is for a woman to make it. Of course, it is difficult in any field, but in the arts, it is, I feel, doubly so. So I would ask you to first speak about it from your experience and from your research, and also then read a little bit in that context.
This question of gender kept coming, you know, I wasn't even really seeking it, but every time I spoke, especially to the women musicians and to Rumi Harish, I kept thinking about gender in various contexts. Of course, in the social and in the professional world, like you mentioned, the challenges women face. Kala Ramnath ji mentions this very openly about the discrimination she faces as a senior woman artist, even in a hierarchy of festivals or in payment or access to opportunities. There's also the question of gender in the actual practice of music and the aesthetics of music. And for a vocalist, many times gender is really connected to the voice and expectations around what a female voice should sound like. So Shubhada Paradkar ji talks about this. She is trained in Gwalior and Agra gharanas, and she has a special liking to the Agra gharana. She kind of uses this aesthetic more. She talks about how in her early days of performance, people were judging her for having a too aggressive gaiki, a masculine style. That they discern this in the way she throws her voice, or if she's doing too much rhythmic laikari, things that are associated with masculine aesthetics. Also, as an Agra vocalist, she sings Nomto Malap, an alap that is traditionally in this gharana, which is a kind of masculine aesthetic done by the vocalists as well as in Drupad. So she's criticized for these things, and she speaks about how she kind of reflects on this, but how she also feels that this question of gender shouldn't be dictating her musical choices. Shubha Joshi ji is another great example. She's a exponent of Thumri Dadra who studied under Vidushi Shobha Guttu. And her question is really about the quality of voice. She's born with a very deep and rich voice, which is beautiful, but not the mainstream expectation for a female, the sur on which women sing. And especially in the genre she's singing. She talks about how for so long she felt just that she couldn't sing this music because she didn't sound like Lata Mangeshkar, until she heard Shobha Guttu ji, and found a voice that resonated. And she saw that there's expression in this also that's appealing to so many people. But so there's so many questions that people are kind of negotiating. And Rumi Harish's story, the most radical questioning of gender in this collection, perhaps, is also connected to the voice, because when Rumi is, before Rumi's transition, he is very unhappy with the quality of his voice. And this question keeps bothering him until, and almost leading him to his gender transition, one of the important parts of his choice to do that, and at which point he's kind of reorienting himself to his new vocal sound and the gender associations of that. So let me read a little bit about, this is what Rumi says about gender. I believe it is possible to sing beyond gender. What makes us think that thick voices are masculine and thin voices are feminine? What about Mansoor, Abdul Karim Khan? I feel his voice is more melodious than Lata Mangeshkar. I don't understand these differences, and I feel this concept of melodiousness is Western. If you compare Siddheshwari Devi and Begum Akhtar, who would you call melodious? Or so many others, Pattamal, MLV, MS, who are Carnatic singers, Gohar Jan, Rasulan Bai. Every voice was so different. The idea of a melodious female voice was created to please men, make men feel comfortable. I think male gaze and male audienceship have influenced a lot of the tradition. In masculine voices, we see a lot of density. There's no need for that kind of density at all spaces, a thick sound to show macho-ness. I feel it's very artificial. And if I can just read a short on the same topic by
Please do.
Shubhadaji, who comes from a very different space, but this is what she says about the matter. This is in response to the critiques that, the reviews of her concerts that were coming in newspapers. It says, it begins by saying, during the early stages of her career, Shubhadaji remembers nervously scanning newspapers for her concert reviews. One of the critiques she faced was that her music was too masculine and aggressive. The masculinity in her music was specifically attributed to her active and lively engagement with laikari and tal. I reflected on this and reduced it a bit. I increased the time and emphasis on sur and alap. I felt there was some truth to the criticism. But I still do nom tom alap because I like it, and I don't think it's too masculine. Why do we need to bring gender into this? It is unfair. Understand an artist as an artist, not as a female or male.
Very important words. And also, this whole tyranny of, the people who are sitting in judgment about who can sing and what they can sing.
Right.
I think that is something that women face always. And another very important question that you bring up several times in the case of every individual artist, in fact, is that of individuality. To borrow from the name of a very important essay by T.S. Eliot, Tradition and the Individual Talent, in a different context, of course, because his work was about literary criticism. But it applies to all art, and individuality is something that everybody has to achieve to become someone, someone who has a signature, someone people will go to listen. So if you would throw some light on that very important issue.
I think this is a very important and challenging issue in a traditional art. When we see kind of contemporary artists working in their mediums, it feels like they have freedom to do so much, and we're working within classical music, for instance, or classical dance. We're really working within frameworks that are expectations. The rules are absolutely kind of fixed. Yeah, they're laid down, and so many of the artists in this book question about where's the newness in what you're doing. If we know this is Rag Yaman, these are the compositions you sing. And of course, we are improvising in this art form, but there's a question of how much is truly new ideas, how much of this improvisation is just rearranging of the ideas we've absorbed. There's a lot of questions around this. Alam Khan says some beautiful things about this, especially because he comes with the pressure of maintaining the lineage of his father and the style of his father. And to him, that is kind of the ultimate. He says, this is the sound of unconditional love. And that sound is his tone, of course, the tone of his instrument and his technique, but also the style in which he's developing the rag and the gat. So Alam speaks about not necessarily trying to change or innovate or invent the third wheel of this, but to be able to maintain this idea. But for his explorations at innovation and individuality, he goes into other kinds of collaborative projects. A lot of the musicians in the book find that space a little more freedom. Suhail Khan also, who comes from a family of also hereditary musicians, grandson of Ustad Sabir Khan. He does a lot of kind of rebellion by going into playing with bands, playing with alternative kinds of musical spaces and organizations until he decides that he wants to come back to his classical roots, but that doesn't mean one and not the other. Each space demands something different, and that's a space for exploring some ideas of individuality. But the flip side being, others could argue that even within the classical medium, that individuality can be explored in terms of maybe exploring new ways of, new texts or new ways of expressing yourself within the material that you have received from your guru. I think it's very challenging as a practitioner and student that we're always seeking this. Like this book is really about finding your voice as a musician. Each artist, no matter how established and senior, seems to never stop looking for their voice, and that's kind of the journey.
Right, and I think you stop being a student and start becoming an artist only when you have found your own individual voice. Yeah, that's a very important part of the journey of becoming an artist. And at this point, I would like to open the discussion to questions. Is there anyone who's read the book or has a question or two? Yes, please.
Hello, good evening to everyone. I haven't read the book yet, but I would love to. I play the sarod a little bit, so since you mentioned Alam Khan and the lineage that he comes from, as a budding classical musician, I sometimes feel that in today's day and age, patience has become an underrated virtue because of you need to churn out, like if you want to get noticed, I see a lot of my friends who are more advanced than me in their musical journey. They're trying to get noticed by churning out content which is within a minute to get that Instagram algorithm going. So is this tradition of Hindustani classical music also being trampled upon by new age practices? And how does the virtue of patience come into this equation?
You take the question. I would just say that it's very hard to trample upon a tradition such as that of Hindustani classical music. But Priya, please take the question.
Yeah, I would agree, but that is might be a strong word, but I think challenges, are we facing challenges because of developments in technology and in lifestyles in the world we're living in? Yes, definitely. And I think while some may argue that there's a lot of benefits to have come about by internet, YouTube is extremely huge for classical musicians nowadays, because now we have a platform to put our music without needing a middleman. For many decades, that was the way of spreading your music. However, the cost of these developments might be high in terms of the mind space it is taking away, the distraction. And Hindustani music, whether it's khayal or dhrupad or instrumental, is a really, an exercise in meditation of some sort. There's no getting around that. So the stillness that it demands is something that seems to be going very much against the grain of what the rest of the world is, the way the rest of the world is moving. So students and practitioners, I won't put them even differently because everybody is caught into this web, have to make, I think, a very sincere effort to balance what it takes to exist, because I understand that artists have to survive and they need to eat and have a place to live. They need to support themselves, and there are a lot of things they may have to do to live the life, sustain their artistic life. However, we have to balance the effect that it might be having on our music. So yes, patience is being challenged, but that's never going to change. There are no shortcuts, I feel, to learning this music, and definitely for those who aspire to perform, it's very demanding.
So thank you for asking that question, because there is absolutely no shortcut to this particular art form. I think we have to end now. Unfortunately, there's no time for any other questions. But in case you have one, maybe you can ask Priya ji off stage. Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Kathakali ji.